approach so that nobody could just discharge into the Lynn Haven, because we wanted to clean up the Lynn Haven. This is actually Alice Creek here, but it ties into what they learned was we jumped too quick, and there were no public discharge places. And so, okay, we made it all in good, we were very proactive, but then we had to retroact and set up some places. And that's what this is. In Alice Creek, just by the museum, we have set up a public discharge. You can pull your boat up here, pull the hose out, and you can pump out your discharge. You've heard through the years, HRSD has worked. They get some volunteers or even interns to drive around the trucks, and they'll drive out and pump out people's boats for them. So it's really been, it's helped a lot. And these, I think we've got to install one more of these, is what we found in Alice Creek, just like we found in Lynn Haven. There's not a 24-hour, 12 months a year facility that's open. Some of the marinas have it, some of the marinas leave it open. When they're open, they have it open to the public, but they weren't year-round at all. So we needed to get some of these. Another thing, like I talked about, sediment. Sediment has a lot of the bacteria and the material and heavy metals on it, and so you want to slow that erosion down. Well, on Mill Dam Creek, you can see, it's not the best picture, but you can see we had no vegetation along it, and so it was just eroding really quickly. And that was allowing a lot of sediment to get downstream, not only silting in things, but moving along bacteria in that. So by doing a project, we like to throw flowers in it, give it a little more color than just the green, but another successful project with trying to handle water quality. I'm now going to go into operations and some of their project. I did get operations, water quality, so that's just summarizing. But like I said, for water quality, they've got the Southern River, the Elizabeth River, the Lynn Haven River working with it. TMDL stands for Total Maximum Daily Load, and they're hit with that also. The EPA wanted to know that we were doing improvements, and so they wanted to have, to measure it. And so we've got to remove so much, like I said, it gets complicated, but we have to remove so much percentage of it every 5 years as we go along. And so they wanted to see what's our plan and how do we plan on doing it. And that's where we're trying to do some different improvements. I think this next slide, excellent. This is Kempsville Lake. I think all of us see it. Here's over by the, so it's just over across. There's the golf course that's over there, the high fence. And Kempsville Lake is, so this is Witch Duck is here, Greenwich Road is right here, so it gives you an idea where it is. There's different ways you can do improvements to existing lakes. You can divide the lake into cells, and that helps the water go slower through it, which helps those sediments settle down. We can also create wetland banks, and that helps that water and that first flush of water coming in run through wetlands and slow it down, and again, pull the nutrients out. So these are different ways that we're retroing in and doing improvements to help water quality. Now, this stuff is expensive, and so we want to hit the big water bodies which have a lot of water coming into it so we can get the best bang for the buck, so we can remove it. As we hit, it's always exponentially takes off. As we hit the bigger ones, then we'll get to the small areas, and small areas, maybe 50 years from now, you'll see us working on even the smaller communities. So, flood control, this is where I spend most of my time. We see flooding in all different parts of the city. Here's Windsor Woods, here's up at the Resort Beach, here's in Cape Henry. This was Rosemont before we put in the pump station down there. And one thing I point out, we like to go out and collect the data and find out how high did the water get, how far did the water reach. And so this is what we call a rack line. This is the trash line. It gives us an approximate how high did the water get. And so you'll see our surveyors go out and grab that. We've also been asking, and we have a link on our webpage, you have photos of the flooding. Please send those in to us, because if we can have where the rack line is, if we can see where the water got up to the bricks on a house or on a mailbox, our surveyors can go out later, survey that, and we use that to validate the models. And I'll talk a little bit about how they're setting up the models and all. But when you do a model, you then want to be able to validate it and make sure that what you're seeing actually makes sense to it. And that's where we really like to send the surveyors out and get some elevations so we can check it. Now, we not only want the photos, like I said, need to be near a coarse brick or something that we can actually go out and do. But we also want the date. When was it? So we can tie it back down to a storm. We need to know which storm it was, because then we can have a better idea. When a storm, we know if there was a high tide, we also know if, how much rain it fell. So here's just from Hurricane Sandy, just showing again what we've used. We have seen flooding throughout the city. Nobody's left unharmed. We see it throughout. And here's the current flood control. I just wanted to show it's here. The 6 years, 123 million. These are the different projects. And I'll get into a little of that. But before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about what is flood control, what causes it, what's coastal, and that. And what I like to tell people, we have tide, and I sometimes get frustrated. People will say they live in the tidewater area and they don't even understand what tide means. I'm like, capital tidewater did not discover us. That we are in the tidewater area. The tide comes in and flows in on us. The worst that we have seen in the last 40 years or so was Norida. In November '09, we saw an elevation of 6.9. The water got up to 6.9. Oh, thank you. Got up to 6.9 in the Lynn Haven River. And I'm going to show you some slides showing what elevations of the land are. Everybody says, 6.9 is not bad if I live at elevation 30. But if you live at elevation 3 or 5, 6.9 means that's your house. So the tide comes in, and the tide can cause problems. The next, and see where my slides go. All right, so I want to talk we're going to concentrate just a little bit on tide. I wanted to show, so in this case, Lynn Haven Colony, you've got some areas that are lower, they're inland, and then you've got higher areas, and then you got low again. Our system, we like to function on gravity, so when it rains, it drains into the ponds or into the canals. They drain out through the pipes into the creeks, in this case, Long Creek, and Long Creek actually drains into the Lynn Haven River and drains out to the Chesapeake Bay. This is another case just showing Cape Story by the sea. And you can see how land varies in height. But what I want to show with tide, so if the tide comes up to an elevation of 5.7, we've seen that, you can see how it just comes over land. It not only comes through the pipe system, but it comes over land. And what a lot of people don't realize is they're inland, and so they're not getting out of their house. The water's coming in, it's hard to drive around, it's hard to drive around our whole city. So they're like, Mike, why am I flooding here? I am inland. I'm multiple blocks, or in Windsor Woods, I'm 5 miles inland. Why does that water get to me? Well, that water is directly connected to the Chesapeake Bay and is draining in, or through our pipes it's draining in and filling the area. And so you can see the houses in the lower areas are flooding. You can also, because you're in that bowl, you're still in that lower area, you are more susceptible. That's even like we see out on the Mississippi River and out in West Virginia, and that if you're in the floodplain, you're in the floodplain. And that's what that means about the water. Now I'm just showing, as water gets higher, it creeps up, can flood more. That 6.9 that I talked about, that we saw there, they're showing how it started flooding even more houses. And then we talk about sea level rise. And if sea level rise is going to be 1.5 to 3 feet, in 20 to 50 to 80 years from now, why do we need to be concerned about it? We can see that's going to bring even more people into being flooded. And that's where some of the concerns get into. So we used to have rain gauges on our fire stations. They started getting a little old, and it's a hard thing for us to maintain. We also found our comm IT people wanted to lock it down. And so if anybody wanted our data, they had to call us, then we had to grab it, then we had to release it. We teamed up with USGS, and they are so great. Our information is out there. We hear about universities all the time just grabbing our information. They don't have to call us up. They go right out to it and they grab it. USGS, you can use that website right there. Matter of fact, you can just say USGS tide gauges, and it will bring you right in, and then you can just tell it Virginia and walk yourself right into Virginia Beach. We have, the triangles are showing our tide gauges, and most of those give us rain also, and then the circles are giving us rain. And so this is how we cover our city. These also, most of these will also tell wind direction, wind speed, and even peak wind. So this is really good information for the scientists to have. It's also good information for us, because in the south end of the city, this is really wind-blown tides. So we can look and we see, well, the wind's been blowing from the south, blowing north for 2-3 days. We're going to see higher elevations here because it is blowing the Pamlico. That's it, the Pamlico Sound. It's just blowing that up. And this fall, what's really been bad, when Hurricane Michael went through, all of that water took some time to drain into the Pamlico and the Albemarle Sound. And it sat there because it can only get out through the openings, through the outer banks. That water has sat there for months, a lot higher than what we typically would see. That water sitting higher is easier when wind is blowing it, it blows it up quicker. And so when we would typically see for normal water, it takes 5 to 7 days blowing from the south to blow it up. With those higher, deeper water, it took it 1 to 3 days to blow that wind up into us. And we saw flooding a whole lot quicker and higher in the southern end. And that's what we unfortunately experienced in October and November of this year in the southern end of the city. And if you drive down there, you would see Muddy Creek and some of the other roads underneath water. Again, it's because those elevations of those roads vary from about 1.5 to 3, and the water blew up. Oh, one other shout out, the great thing that we tell people along the coastline that USGS has set up here, you can go into it and give it your cell phone number or your email or both, and tell it at this elevation, send me a text, and it will text you to let you know, hey, you may want to go change the tidal ropes, change the lines on your boat. You may want to get your car up to higher land. So again, just this good information out there. And so we've been telling people, if you live near an area, please consider that. Now this is rainfall. I apologize, but the other portion of the storm. So you have the tide that comes in and floods us. You also have rain. Rain falls on us, falls on our house, has to drain from our house to our grass, our lawns, out into the street. From the streets, it finds our inlets into the pipe system and then drains out into our canals, into our ditches, ultimately getting into our main rivers, which are the Lynn Haven River, the Elizabeth River, and draining out into the Chesapeake Bay or out directly into the Atlantic Ocean if you're in the south, draining down to North Landing River and then out that way. But the water's got to take its time to drain out. As the more or the higher intensity of that rain hits us, it's more stacking up. It's like if we all walk into the deli at the same time in all round numbers, well, some of us are going to have to wait 30 people before we get our turn to ask the deli meat guy for meat or cheese or any of that. Same thing's happening for the cool water. In this case, though, it's standing around in our streets. Once the capacity in our pipes is full, the next place for that water to sit is in our streets. And then from there, it's sitting in our lawns and then into our houses. So that's why you will hear us say, the higher your house is from the road, the more protection you've got. Unfortunately, we have some neighborhoods that there's only about a 6-inch difference between their finished floor and the road. So when that water starts stacking up, there's not a lot of protection there, and quickly it's into their houses. And that's why you hear Suffolk has pushed, I think they've got through, all houses have to be built 3 feet above the FEMA floodplain elevation. You'll hear us push for it too. That costs more money, and so there's a pushback from developers and that type of stuff. And that's, they're not here, so I can throw them under the bus. I'm pushing for you to be higher, but those are the reason. But again, you can see Tropical Storm Ernesto, we got 10 inches of rain in 27 hours. We got 9 to 10 inches of rain in the November 09 storm in 30 hours. What the big thing we want to point out, and I'll say some more, is for Matthew, we not only saw Matthew, we saw, and I'm looking here because I get them out of order all the time, Hermine we saw, and Hermine dropped between 3 and 5 inches of rain in 12 hours on September 1st through September 3rd. We then had Julia drop on the September 19th through the 22nd, drop about 9 to 15 inches, depending on where you were in the city. And then we had Matthew on October 8th through the 9th, drop another 8 to 14 inches. So when you add all three of those up, you get anywhere from 25 to 33 inches or so fell in about 45 days.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of water. Sorry, not a lot. We only see 45 to 47 inches a year. So we saw, you know, what we typically would get, 50 to 70% of our rain fell in a month and a half. That's a lot of water. You then also add in, our ground was saturated. So,
Had nowhere to go.
had nowhere to go. And I like to say the water was actually leaching up through the ground. So typically we only see 30% of water draining off our residential properties. The rest is soaking in and all that type of stuff. So we really only sized our pipes for that. So all this extra water had no place to go. It's sitting in the roads. It's flooding people's houses. So this, I like to show people this. This is how we do, we look at intensities and that type of stuff. So we like to do based on the 10-year, and we like to say, okay, what's the rainfall for, how much rain would we expect in 60 minutes? Well, that would be 2 inches in 60 minutes for a 5-year rainfall event, would be 2 inches. For a 24-hour event, it's 4.62, and for a 10-year, it's 5.51. So intensity matters, because if you only get 2 inches over 10 days, you can see here, 10 days of 1-year storm is 5 inches, so it'd be up here, it's even less. In 6 hours, it's a 1-year storm. If we get it in 60 minutes, it's a 5-year storm. If we get it in 15 minutes, it's a 500-year event. So it all depends. Now, one of the things that we're noticing with these rain gauges that we've got throughout the city, storms aren't even. So we'll have some rainfall, but we'll have these microbursts that just happen over a really small area that drop this water. And so we can find these events occur. And overall, with the climate change and that, they're finding we're getting more frequent of these little microbursts. The other thing I talked about, you know, 10 inches of rain over 45 days, that's a 1-year storm. 1% chance that it would occur in any 1 year. But if it's in 7 days, well, then it's a 25-year storm. And then if it's in 24 hours, it's a 100-year storm. Basically, you flip it over. So a 100-year storm is a 1% chance in any 1 year. So that gives you, so just give me an idea how we talk about. So you combine the sea level rise, high tides, you combine coastal storms, the rainfall falling on us, and low elevations. We try to use color coding, and this isn't coming up that well, I apologize, but blue is representing the lower areas. This is, Duck is the Duck Inn used to be right here, to give you an idea. This is the Leicester Bridge here. Seashore State Park is over here, so this is giving you an idea. For a lot of us that are older, this is the duck bill that we all talk about. But you can see we have a bowl is created, the yellow being higher and the orange being the highest. This creates a bowl in here, and this bowl is what fills up with water. This bowl is also tightly connected because it actually, this canal, which isn't showing up that well, drains right by the boat motel, drains up and in here, so the tide can come in here and flood this all the time. I'm going to show you what that is. But one thing to also keep in mind, remember, Sandy we saw a tidal elevation of 5.7, and Norida we saw a 6.9. So here's 3, elevation 3 of the tide. We can see the poor houses that face right up to the water. They have the great benefit of being able to walk right onto your boat, come out through the sound and run out. But if your house is that low, that water's coming right in on you. Here you can see the water's getting up in the canal here, and this canal's top of bank is about elevation 3 to 3.5, 4, depending on along it. But we'll walk through some increments here. So there's 4. You can see how that's spilling in the area, and then up here we're just going to track how many houses are being affected by it. So we're at 73 houses already. So we go to elevation 5, you can see we're filling in more. We're up to about 300 houses now.